Well, greetings. My name is Mandivamba Rukuni, and my apologies for not making it to the third global conference. I'm a panelist on the Global Trends Commentary session, and my topic is recent developments in food and nutrition security on the African continent. Well, let me start with the status of food and nutrition security in Africa. Estimates 2016 show that at least 150 or so million individuals suffer one way or another from food insecurity in Africa. Although this is still an alarming number, this comes on the backdrop of a situation that's improving in Africa. The one milestone is in the year 2014, 2015, Africa is estimated to have actually achieved adequate food to feed everybody on the continent, although this food is poorly distributed. So as Africa advances its food sector and its agricultural sector, the top priority for Africa is really just to build a much more broad-based transformational economy which includes more people. What we have to try to do in Africa is simply to reduce poverty, because poverty is the main cause of food insecurity and nutrition insecurity. So it's good to note that poverty levels have actually declined in Africa, although Africa still has the highest number of poor people in the world, but it's declining. When it comes to nutrition, Africa still suffers from the three nutritional insecurities, that is malnutrition, also undernutrition, as well as obesity. So all those are key policy elements. One of the challenges in Africa is just unstable food markets. Commodity prices that are unstable go up and down, and also an increasing number of natural disasters, whether droughts or flooding, and droughts are becoming multi-year droughts as opposed to single-year events several decades ago. So the challenge is to increase resilience, especially given climate change issues. So a major aspect in Africa is promoting and financing programs that promote climate resilience agriculture. As I said earlier, there's been marked improvements in nutrition, although many are still insecure. As a matter of fact, the good news is that in terms of undernutrition, this has declined from about 28% in the year 2000 to about 20% today. The percentage of stunted children decreased from 49% in 1990 to 35% today. So that's progress. But in spite of this progress, population is still rising in Africa. And that population growth means that absolute numbers of stunted children has actually increased from 45 million in 1990 to about 57 million today. The issue of foreign aid is still a major problem for Africa. On one hand, food aid is necessary and useful for serious emergencies and crises. But as a general solution, it is becoming more of a problem because food aid disrupts markets and also disrupts budget processes of countries which don't have a stable governance systems. But we know that the donor support for food aid is also dwindling, and this in the short term is a source of further insecurities. But the traditional problem with food aid has been that once a nation gets food aid assistance, there's a tendency for a substitution effect where governments spend less on an issue they should be dealing with because the donors chipping in. So if there's one major solution, I would say is broadly in the area of policy, broadly speaking, policies in Africa, policies to transform and broaden economies so that most people are going to be logged in, the part of the mainstream economy. But there's been a kind of proliferation of policy frameworks in Africa, partly imported and partly homegrown. So most African countries, as we know, struggled to internalize the MDGs, and now we've got the Sustainable Development Goals. These are somewhat an improvement over the MDGs, but there's still issues. In terms of regional policy frameworks, I suppose the most important one so far has been the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, CAADP. Since 2003 has been the main policy guideline for agriculture in Africa. In the year 2014, the African heads of states actually pushed the CAADP agenda with a Malabo Declaration, which wants to see, it's actually a commitment to see Africa food insecure and nutrition secure by 2025. That is a space of 10 years. And this is a very noble program, but once again, poorly implemented. So both global as well as regional policy programs, which actually sound well, are noble, suffer from this problem of poor implementation, which is an issue that I won't have time to go through in detail today, but it's just a way of concluding my statement by suggesting that as Africa improves its agricultural sector, that sector is growing, the economies are also stable and starting to grow again. But in order to really fast track solutions to food and nutrition insecurity, there's now need for a much more deliberate approach to building inclusive economies, in growing the domestic market, linking smallholder farmers to mainstream markets so that they are not just dependent on side markets. And it is possible then that by 2030, Africa will meet the SDG goal of being food and nutrition secure. Well, thank you very much. And once again, my apologies for not being able to make it physically to the conference. Bye.